What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the final free God episode of Know Your Enemy. My name is TrendKiLL. Let's get into it. So if you haven't noticed, there are always 10 free gods available in SMITE. There are 5 core gods that are always available, and 5 rotating gods that are available every patch. This being the 5th episode will be the last video where we talk about the 5 free gods, and we will now move on to any gods that are in rotation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the guide. Today we're going to be talking about Guan, the Chinese saint of war. So if you've watched this series before, you'll know that the first thing we do in each episode is we take a look at a visual representation of what each god is good at. And the first thing you're going to notice about Guan is that his graph is a little more filled in than most of the other gods that we've looked at, and that is because he is a warrior. Now, warriors are kind of like in the middle between guardians and assassins. They can do either role should they be built one way or another. So you're going to see that warriors are going to be a little more jack of all trades rather than excelling in one specific area. A good example of that would be to compare him to all the other assassins or compare him to all the other guardians. Let's use guardians for example. Guardians have a lot of initiation and separation and hard CC abilities, whereas Guan Yu's abilities are more soft CC, but he's got cooldown reduction options that allow him to use that soft CC more often. So you can see by looking at this graph that Guan Yu's really not bad in any one spot. However, damage is his lowest statistic on this graph, but remember, he is a physical god, so if he were to build physical damage items, his auto attacks and abilities are still going to hurt. So just because that he shows low damage on this graph does not mean that he doesn't have the capabilities to do a lot of damage should he choose to build that way. Alright, so let's move on and talk about his abilities. If you remember from the Thor guide, I told you that Thor's abilities are pretty straightforward, but the way you use them and the mechanics behind them are a little more tricky and required some explanation. Guan Yu is the opposite. His mechanics and the way he plays in the game, pretty straightforward. However, his abilities have some intricacies that I think we need to talk about. Let's start off with his passive Painless. This is not a kit-encompassing passive ability like Neith's Broken Weaves, and I do think that the tooltip is a bit confusing and needs some explanation. So first things first, let's talk about the ability. As you take damage from different sources or from the same source, you build up what is called Conviction. Once you build up 20 stacks of Conviction, your next heal will be a double heal. So that increases your healing by 100%. What is not obvious from playing him for the very first time is that every single hit up to 20 will add 5% up to 100%, and you can get that by very simple math. 100% extra heal divided by 20 stacks is 5% per stack up to 20, or 100%. So it's going to be very rare that your heal is only going to heal you for the base amount. Your passive is almost always going to come into play. Now, another thing they don't mention is that when you build up 20 stacks and you get your double heal, that will clear your passive completely, and you will have to build up another 20 stacks. To a normal person, that sounds pretty obvious because otherwise it would be completely overpowered. However, to a new player, you may not understand that. And lastly, this should be pretty obvious based on the wording. However, make sure you understand that whether you're hit by a 1000 damage ability or a 1 damage ability, that counts as 1 stack. More damage does not equal more stacks. Now, his first 2 abilities, Conviction, his heal, and Warrior's Will, his dash, are externally just that, a heal and a dash. However, internally, they have a built-in cooldown reduction mechanic that adds a little flavor and utility to those 2 abilities. So essentially, if I were to heal a friendly god with Conviction, that would reduce all of my cooldowns by 2 seconds. If I were to dash through an enemy god with Warrior's Will, that would again reduce all of my ability cooldowns by 2 seconds. Now, this includes the abilities themselves. So an example, Conviction is a 10-second cooldown. If I were to heal a friendly god, that would start that cooldown at 8 seconds. If I was then able to somehow dash through an enemy, that would again reduce all of my cooldowns by another 2 seconds, which would make Conviction essentially a 6-second cooldown. Now, as far as his third ability, TALOU Assault, is concerned, I want to make sure I define Protection Stolen. Stolen is not a word that you're going to see often on SMITE tooltips. So what that means is that Guan Yu has the ability to take protections from his enemies and add them to himself. So at max rank, at max stacks, he will steal a total of 30 protections from an enemy and add 30 protections to himself, which is a 60 protection swing. Now, we've talked about not boxing people. When the passive of TALOU Assault is active for that 3-second duration, you have to be very careful boxing him because you are much weaker and he is much stronger for those 3 seconds. Now, as far as his ultimate Cavalry Charge is concerned, my god, this ability does a ton of stuff. First off, it does a lot of damage. It does even more damage if you get hit consecutively during the ultimate. It also slows you, and at the end of the ult, stuns you, so you have to be very careful around this. As long as you've read the ability, it should be pretty straightforward. However, the one tricky thing that most other gods in Smite don't have is a damage escalation. So if you get caught in his ultimate, you have to do everything you can to get out. Otherwise, he is going to pour on the damage. Alright, so on to the mechanics section. Remember I told you that Guan Yu's mechanics are not all that complicated, so you're going to see that this is a very bottom-heavy list. Most of the tips that I have for you are going to be about TALOU Assault and Cavalry Charge. However, let's speed through Conviction and Warrior's Will first. These two abilities mechanically are very straightforward, and we've got most of the technical stuff out of the way when we were talking about the highlights of the abilities earlier. So as far as conviction tips are concerned, remember that any god with an AoE heal can be extremely annoying to lane against. Guan Yu, Hel, Ra, Sylvanas, all of these gods can not only heal themselves and their teammates, but also the minions that are in the lane with them. Now, because he is a warrior, you will often see Guan Yu play the Guardian role and play in the duo lane with the Hunter. That can be really annoying for the enemy duo lane because they are almost guaranteed to be outpushed. So if you happen to see Guan Yu playing the role of the enemy Guardian in the duo lane, remember that you're going to have a much harder time burning down his minions. As far as Warrior's Will is concerned, remember to never underestimate the 20% slow that this ability has. That gives Guan just enough staying power to be extremely annoying and always on top of you. If you couple that with all the cooldown reduction from Conviction at Warrior's Will, it's going to seem like he is permanently TALOU assaulting you, and you can't get away because he's continually slowing you as well. And God help you should he also, on top of all that, have Sprint and or some form of Creeping Curse. Good luck. Now, this next tip I've got is for both Warrior's Will and TALOU Assault. This is like a combo move, but first we have to understand that Warrior's Will, the dash, is really Guan Yu's only burst damage. TALOU Assault, damage over time. Cavalry Charge, damage over time. Conviction is a heal. So Warrior's Will is the only thing that's going to do instant damage at a high amount. Now, I told you this was a combo move between Warrior's Will and TALOU Assault, so first off, let's do some math and compare the two abilities. So let's look at max rank, and let's ignore scaling for the time being, just looking at the base damage. Warrior's Will at max rank will do 300 damage, where TALOU Assault will do 55 damage per hit for 9 hits for a total of 495 damage. Also notice that you max out your protection stolen at 3 stacks, but the ability hits 9 times, meaning that you're at full potential on protection stolen in the first second of a 3-second ability. Now, in that first second, you will deal 165 damage. In the last 2 seconds, you will deal 330 damage. However, remember his second ability, Warrior's Will, deals 300 damage. Now, I'm telling you all this because I have been burnt a couple times by trying to TALOU Assault somebody to death only for their jump or dash to come off of cooldown and then to get away because I tried to use a 3-second channeled ability instead of relying on instant damage. So if you happen to be playing a Guan Yu who knows how to play his character, who knows the math behind it, and knows what he has to do to kill you, you can guarantee that you're going to see him TALOU Assault for 1 second to get the full potential out of the penetrations and protections, cancel that, and then dash through you for the instant damage from Warrior's Will. That will deal a total of 465 damage versus an entire 3-second channel TALOU Assault dealing 495. So you save 2 seconds but deal 30 damage less. You can do a lot more and deal a lot more than 30 damage in 2 seconds. Now, while this scenario will not come up all that often, it's worth noting so that you can kind of understand how you need to look at your abilities as you're playing these gods. While this is a series teaching you how to play against very specific gods, I want to make sure I sprinkle little bits of information like this throughout the series so that you're not only learning something extremely specific, but you're also picking up general tips along the way. Now, for his final ability, Cavalry Charge, remember that during this ability at any time, Guan Yu can cancel the ability to make sure that he lands the stun that happens at the end. Now, this mechanic gives this tip a lot more use than if you just had to go through the entire ultimate to get the stun. This can be an extremely nasty way to open a team fight because the enemy team might be expecting you to just run in and start slashing everything up, but they're going to spread out if you do that. So just jumping on your horse and canceling it just to get the big stun in the team fight may catch 3 or 4 people in the stun, and if it does, that's a humongous advantage for your team for that fight. Another use for this is stealing objectives like Gold Fury or Fire Giant. A lot of the times when people are getting an objective, they're bunched up around it. So what you can do is run in on your horse, hop off, stun everybody, and hand to the gods it to steal it right at the last second. Guan Yu is an amazing objective stealer, and you're going to see this a lot more than you might think. And for my last tip, and I can't find any math or numbers behind this, but from testing it seems that Cavalry Charge increases your base movement speed by a certain percentage. So what that means is no matter how fast you're currently going, Cavalry Charge will make you go faster. So using Cavalry Charge with just boots will make you go fast. Using it with boots and speed buff and sprint will make you go insanely fast. So never count Guan Yu out of a team fight because he can engage from a pretty far distance away. Also, he's pretty safe to disengage should he need to get out of a fight. Cavalry Charge is a great way to do that. So there you go, 5 gods down and only 50-something left. Anyway guys, hopefully you learned some stuff today and hopefully you come by next week when we're going to talk about Anhur, the Egyptian slayer of enemies.